Hare Krishna. So we welcome everyone for studying Srimad Bhagavatam. There are two mighty, very experienced and especially dharmic administrators, Yudhishthir and Bhishma, who are meeting at an occasion where another Kshatriya is about to pass away. And in that setting, they are discussing so to call worldly topics. Not worldly in the context of wanting to enjoy the world of matter, but worldly in the context of managing the material world in relationship to Krishna consciousness. That's why the term dharma is added to each of those items. Dana dharma, Raja dharma, Moksha dharma, like that. Sthiti dharma. So in the previous class we studied the ashrama dharma very elaborately, varna dharma, and each of us must situate ourselves in one of these, varna or ashrama, firmly and follow that dharma. Now today we will discuss, while going through the purport, each of these items, dana dharma, etc. So purport begins with the explanation on dana dharma, and each subsequent purport will explain one item, each subsequent paragraph. What is dana dharma? To give charity is one of the householder's main function. And he should be prepared to give in charity at least 50% of his hard-earned money. Brahmachari should perform sacrifices, householder should give charity, Vanaprastha and renounced sannyas should practice penance and austerities. These are general functions. So when you say samasa, samasa means in summary, and vyasa means in elaboration, in detail. So samasa, vyasa, yogataha, both are being explained. In the brahmachari life, the training is sufficiently imparted so that one may understand that the world as property belongs to the Supreme Lord. No one therefore can claim to be the proprietor of anything in the world. So how is this taken care of in brahmachari life? He is taught Sambandha, Abhidheya, Prayojana, Jnana through the Vedas. The most important item of brahmachari life is whatever money, grains, even respect or facilities that a brahmachari may get, he is taught to offer it all to his guru without keeping anything with himself. And that is the beginning of no proprietorship over anything. And if it is allocated back to me by the guru, then I can use it in some service or for personal nourishment. So that is the understanding. And we must follow this in our brahmachari life very strictly. Things that come to us should go directly to the service of the deity or the guru, or in the absence of guru, to the representatives of guru, who allocate us our nourishment and our service. That is brahmachari life in nutshell. So this training, when it becomes mature, then when he enters into grihastha ashrama, he doesn't claim unnecessary proprietorship over things. Now, why does he need to enter? In the life of a householder, which is a sort of license for sex enjoyment, one must give in charity for the service of the Lord. Everyone's energy is generated or borrowed from the reservoir of energy of the Lord. You can visualize that? Therefore, the resultant actions of such energy must be given to the Lord in the shape of transcendental loving service for Him. As the rivers draw water from the sea through the clouds and again go down to the sea, similarly our energy is borrowed from the Supreme Source, the Lord's energy, and it must return to the Lord. That is perfection of our energy. Therefore, Lord says, Yat karoshi, yadashnasi, yad juhosi dadasi yat, yat tapasyasi kaunteya, tat kurushva madarpanam. That is the way of utilizing our borrowed energy. I add emphasis when I read borrowed energy. When our energy is utilized in that way, our energy is purified from the contamination of material inebrities, and thus we become fit for our original nature, natural life of service to the Lord. What a beautiful purport. So two things, nothing belongs to me, and the more I possess, the less I have, are very important concepts to be understood. Generally, materialistic culture teaches us the opposite. It teaches us, grab as much as you can, then hold it with you, don't share, and then more. Ye dil mange more. So this is a typical calculation in material life. In Vedic culture, it is exactly opposite. So, these two concepts, nothing belongs to me, and the more I possess, the less I have. What does the second term mean? We generally tend to think that if I accumulated some extra amount of money or 2 extra flats or bungalows or some 15-20 pens. Some people have that hobby of collecting pens. So like that, everybody has something or other. The less I have of what? The less I have of my own consciousness in my custody. My consciousness then becomes invested, which is my original energy. That gets invested in maintaining, protecting, multiplying, all these so-called things that I possess. But less I have means I have less time for myself. I have less time for my relationship with God. I have less time for serving God. So that is the meaning of the more I possess, the less I have. The what I have less of, the less of my spiritual nature can I exert. And the more of my energy will go into materialistic activities, which are extraneous to my soul. So that is the meaning of the more I possess, the less I have. So one has to get these two things very straight in order to become charitable. Important? So what are the two things? Nothing belongs to me. The more I possess, the less I have. These are very important concepts when it comes to becoming charitably disposed in our life. Sometimes as devotees, we have a tendency that, let's say you heard some nice classes, or you studied some scripture with some study books and you made nice notes, and then you become trained to speak them very nicely. Then typically the tendency is that if someone comes and says and asks you, where did you prepare that from? It was such a nice thing you spoke. Then you tend to say nothing about the source. Oh, it all just dawned upon me by my realizations that I have in Krishna consciousness. It's already borrowed plumes, but we would not like to share. So that's just an indication of how our mind works in hoarding or having possessiveness. On the contrary is the mind of a Brahmana, which is very liberal. all he needs to make sure is that the candidate who is receiving that knowledge or facility is a fitting one, is appropriate one. He has no inhibitions. Just like Tukaram Maharaj says, भरे तरी देऊ कासे ची लंगोटी. मतलब एक कौपिन पहन के रखा है, वो भी निकाल के दे दूंगा अगर कोई मांगे तो. So that is the mood in which the devotees of the Lord function. Because what can anybody loot from me? Two things. Nothing I possess, and what I possess, the more I possess, the less I have. So in this mood, if you think of it, it's better that, so to say, we are looted for some good purpose. Because anyways, it doesn't belong to us. Some good thing will happen in the world around. So with this mood, we should function. Not just about money, especially about knowledge, resources, and other wonderful things that we come across in our life. We should be in a mood of sharing them with others. And we should teach the same to our children. Typically, parents, they want to show that they are teaching benevolence to their kids by forcing them to share their toys. In front of other friends in some birthday party or something. Oh, you should share, all that they will show. But the parents themselves don't share their toys with other people around. They will hold on to them. So this is not going to work. Being charitable, especially of knowledge of Krishna consciousness, is a very important quality. It is the greatest wealth we can give to somebody. न चोरहार्यम न च राजहार्यम न भ्रातृभाज्यम न च भारकारी व्यये कृते वर्धत एव नित्यम विद्याधनम सर्वधन प्रधानम. So for all the wealth you can gather or distribute, vidyadhana is the knowledge, transcendental knowledge. Sarvadhana pradhanam is the best. Why? Na choraharyam, thieves cannot steal. Na cha rajaharyam, government can't put a tax on it. Na bhratrubhajyam, your relatives can't do batwara. You have too much transcendental knowledge. Na bhratrubhajyam. Na cha bharakari, it never becomes burdensome, no matter how much you have. And vyaye krute vardhata eva nityam. The more you spend it, it increases in you. And that's one of the reasons why we should be charitable about it. Vidyadhanam sarvadhana pradhanam. Of course, not just knowledge, especially for householders, their hard-earned money also must be spent for noble causes in Krishna consciousness. So that was about dana dharma. Why we should become charitable? Because we possess nothing, and the more we possess, the less we have. And that Prabhupada very beautifully explains through that analogy, that the Lord is the reservoir of all energy. So all our energy is either generated from or borrowed from that reservoir. And what is the perfection of that borrowed or generated energy? To be utilized back into the service of the Lord fully. Everything in this creation, as we know, is cyclic. That's evam pravartitam chakram. Krishna is talking about in Bhagavad Gita. Evam pravartitam chakram nanuvartayati hayah. What is the next line? One who does not follow this cycle of yajna. We are borrowing from the Pancha Mahabhutas, we are borrowing from the universal mind, universal intelligence, universal ego, ingredients, and then we are acting in this world through that energy, producing something that has to be offered back into the service of the Lord. Aghayur indriya ramo mogham parthasa jivati. Krishna is saying, Aghayu means his whole life is sinful. Such a person who does not do such a following of the cycle. And mogham parthasa jivati, he simply lives in vain. In our English we call it living like a vegetable. Frozen vegetable. in modern times. Nothing good that is coming out. So one thing we should hate in our life is to be unproductive in service of Krishna. Is to spend our time or energy uselessly somewhere which does not produce quality service. We should hate even a moment's waste or a fraction of energy being misspent in activities that are not furthering the service of the Lord. And when thus our energy is spent, when our energy is utilized in that way, our energy is purified from the contamination of material inebrities. Thus we become fit for our original natural life of service to the Lord. And that's why Ishopanishad very beautifully describes Ishavasyam idam saram. Yat kinchat jagatyam. Whatever is set aside as your quota, take it. Tena tyaktena bhunjitha. But don't encroach on another's property. Then it says, Kurvan iva iha karmani. In this spirit, if you go on acting, jiji vishe chatam samaha, hundreds of years you can live in this world without getting any karma. And evam tvai nanyathe tosti na karma lipyate nare. You will not be bound by any kind of inebrities. Karmic reactions will not touch you. So if you ask devotees, what do you want to do after this lifetime? More service. So you ask them, are you not satisfied by doing 108 temples that you built? No? For example, Prabhupada did something, or whatever he did for serving the Lord. He said, no, I'm not satisfied. Given an opportunity, would like to do much more. So this is how we have to be enthusiastic to spend our energy in service of the Lord. And Prabhupada makes it very generic. Dana, he just doesn't speak of money, he speaks of energies, which means everything. Money, time, talent, everything. Now begins Raja Dharma. Raja Dharma is a great science. Unlike modern diplomacy for political supremacy. What a line. Raja Dharma is a great science. It is sacred. Politics is not bad. It is needed. But how to do that is a great science. The kings were trained systematically to become munificent and not merely be tax collectors. They were trained to perform different sacrifices only for the prosperity of the subjects. To lead the prajas to the attainment of mukti was a great duty of the king. The father, the spiritual master, and the king are not to become irresponsible in matter of leading their subjects to the path of ultimate liberation from birth, death, disease, and old age. When these primary duties are properly discharged, there is no need of government of the people by the people. Which means, if there is a father in the home, if there is a teacher in the school, spiritual master, and if there is a king in the government who make sure that they themselves and their subjects are walking the path of salvation, then you don't need government of the people by the people. Everyone will function into their own position very perfectly. In modern days, the people in general occupy the administration by strength of manipulative votes. You have seen that? I heard one interesting story that in some place, I don't want to name, the poll was making a particular leader get maximum votes. But the Prime Minister of the country intervened and changed the entire ballot. The whole poll was changed to make another person win in that, so to say, contingency. To this degree, the manipulation happens. So we are thinking, oh, I gave a vote. Hopefully, it will add something into the value system of this. Of course, I'm not saying we should not give votes. We should. But the point is, the manipulative nature is so high that it is simply impossible by this kind of methods to get the desired king to rule. But they are never trained in the primary duties of the king. How many people who become politicians at least spend 20 years learning about what are they supposed to do in service of the society? Engineers spend, right, 15-20 years learning something to build a bridge or raise a skyscraper. Or doctors, we know how much they slog to learn what they do with the bodies of people. How many of our politicians really get trained to occupy that post to do responsible service for the society? So there is a great need of having such colleges where we train our administrators. Of course, there is IAS officers in India through which the political bureaucracy works. But the problem is, the trained IAS officers are like puppets in the hands of the most corrupt and selfish heads of states who are, by public manipulation of votes, occupying that particular position. So, under the circumstances, the untrained administrators play havoc to make the subjects happy in all respects. What does that mean? If you try to make your subjects happy in all respects, you create havoc in the society. Because the Shudras will have their type of demands, Vaishyas will have their types of demands. And if you go by satisfying the people, like a typical politician has to promise that after I come into power, I'll grant so many liquor shops, licenses, so many cinema halls or whatever, permission, and I'll make all these facilities for sense gratification in the society. And in this way, this kind of manipulation for getting votes doesn't work. On the other hand, these untrained administrators gradually become rogues and thieves and increase the taxation to finance a top-heavy administration that is useless for all purposes. Very graphic description. In fact, sometimes I feel it is very nice that we are not hearing from Bhishmadev, Dana Dharma and Moksha Dharma and Raja Dharma. We are hearing it from Prabhupada. Because what Prabhupada is doing in the purport, he is actually conveying, according to our time, place, circumstance, what is exactly meant by Raja Dharma. What are we to do to rectify the situation? So in that sense, we are good not hearing from Bhishmadev. Of course, we are hearing from Bhishmadev. But the way Prabhupada is conveying the ideas is more important in current time, place, circumstance. What was that news that had come? That an average political leader, he gets from government some X amount of his salary and perks. Then he gets 100x from the bribes and other things that he manages. And in the end, that the work that he produces is not even worth 25x. The tangible good work that he is supposed to be sitting in the seat and doing it. So you can imagine how much expense simply goes, just to make these people sit in that seat and do something, for the society. That Panama, what was that? Paper leak. You heard of that? Panama paper leak. So, if Ashu has a piggy bank, and he is regularly depositing some money in it, but then his mother is overseeing, where the money gets spent, when it gets accumulated. And say Ashu thinks, "Arey, mummy thoda zyada interfere karta hai piggy bank mein." So he goes and finds another neighborhood lady who is like a friend to his mother or whatever, and says, "Auntie, aapke ghar pe rakho mera piggy bank." मैं इधर आके डिपॉजिट करूँगा, लेकिन आप बीच बीच में देखना नहीं मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ अबाउट दैट मनी. She said, yeah, no problem. As long as you give me some little commission, I would not bother with your system, how you spend that money. This is exactly how some politicians evade taxes of their own country and they put their money in some fake, so to say, corporations or industry or organization, fake, created by some other countries where the taxation laws are very weak. And they make some adjustment with them. And in this way, crores and crores of rupees actually are being stocked up by them without using in their own service, in the service of their own countrymen. So that is in short. So the firm that had such stocks with them leaked the papers of the names of people who are involved in that corruption. They gave it directly to the media and to the, you can imagine what will happen. And then all these politicians are under shock because it's such a big scandal. That's called, in short, Panama paper leak. So this is a typical example of what Prabhupada is talking here about. They gradually become rogues and thieves and increase the taxation to finance top-heavy administration. Means that they don't compromise at all on tax that they gather. But where does that tax go? It goes to the piggy bank of another mom, so to say, who doesn't bug them about how they use those funds. So Ashu is not that kind of a boy. He's a very nice boy. He's very moral, high in character, and I just use as an example to make a case. Actually, the qualified Brahmanas are meant to give direction to the kings for proper administration. And how you give direction? Manu Samhita, Dharma Shastras of Parashara. These are two important literatures to be studied if you are a Kshatriya. Of course, if you are a Brahmana. And if you want to help society become proper, then you should know these two scriptures. Of course, we should learn those scriptures under a spiritual master. Not just go and pick up something in the market and start reading it. That's not the way how Vedic culture works. A typical king is the ideal of people in general, and if the king is pious, religious, chivalrous and munificent, the citizens generally follow him. Such a king is not a lazy, sensuous person living at the cost of the subjects, but alert always to kill thieves and dacoits. It seems that's one of the most important duties of the king, to kill people around who are not following dharma. The pious kings were not merciful to dacoits and thieves in the name of nonsensical ahimsa. Prabhupada is really upset. Because the word added nonsensical, in the name of ahimsa. Nonsensical ahimsa. So then you get the mood behind. The thieves and dacoits were punished in an exemplary way so that in the future no one would dare commit such nuisances in an organized form. Abhi to individually kar rahe, then they will do it in organized form. Such thieves and dacoits were never meant for administration as they are now. So we know the famous story of Shivaji. There was this, I forget that Sardar's name. He had a very, very right-hand man type of a army general. Something like Hambir Rao Mohite or that kind of name. And in one of their swari, they call it. Swari means an attack that they did on some Muslim province. This person actually touched the wife of that opposite person's family, and he brought her to Shivaji thinking that Shivaji will be very happy to enjoy with this woman. Because he had earlier precedents of stupid Muslim kings, the way they were sensuous. And it is said Shivaji, although this man was the number one man of his army, He brought this lady and presented before Shivaji. Shivaji offered obeisances to her and called her my mother. And with great respect, he arranged for her to go back to her family and be cared for very nicely. And then when all that was settled, he turned towards this guy and ordered that both his hands be lopped off, cut. And everyone was shocked, in the kingdom, because he's the number one man who actually won many battles. Now you lop off his arms, he's practically useless throughout his life. And that was done. Now you imagine the rest of the Sardars in Shivaji's army, what lesson will they get out of this? They said, never touch a woman. So this is the power of a good king, the way they would do administration. And we have many such examples in our Vedic history of kings of this caliber who would not spare the thieves and rogues. In fact, I have heard even now, I don't know the country, Kuwait or some Muslim country, the law is so strong that if a thief is caught, they cut the hands. Even now, even today. So, there the crime rate is 1/10 of what is otherwise in the world around. Of course, we are not discussing here the pros and cons in the democratic society about having such laws. We are just discussing a principle that the king must be very strong in the way he administers even punishment and justice to the citizens. So this was about Rajadharma in terms of learning the science of political supremacy. So how does a king get political supremacy? First, he has to arrange that every family, school and leader in the government is practicing Krishna consciousness. Because the family head will take care of the family, the school will take care of the community, and the government head will take care of that particular province. Second thing for political supremacy is take guidance from Brahmanas who know how to guide. I recently was reading Ramayana. Dashrath Maharaj had 8 counselors, Akopa, Dharmadnya, Sumantra, 8 of them. Each of them were excellent in one field. And then he had 9 sages guiding him. Vasishtha and I think Vamadev were the topmost Brahmarshis who guided him. And then there were 7 other sages whose counsel he sought on a regular basis. And that is why it says Dashratha's kingdom had not a single person who was sensuous or unengaged or not following his dharma so that he will become perfected being in his life. There was no such a person in his kingdom. Third thing was, the king must invest a lot in himself to get trained. He should spend quality time getting training. He should himself become exemplary and not follow the nonsensical ahimsa when it comes to punishing thieves and dacoits. So these are some laws for administration. Now begins taxation. The taxation law was simple. There was no force, no encroachment. The king had a right to take 1/4 of the production made by the subject. One would never grudge parting with it because, due to the pious king and religious harmony, there was enough natural wealth, grains, fruits, flowers, silk, cotton, milk, jewels, minerals, and therefore no one was materially unhappy. The citizens were rich in agriculture and animal husbandry, and therefore they had enough grains, fruits, milk, without any artificial needs of soaps and toilets, cinemas and bars. Sudden twists, you know, and very beautiful ones. So, first of all, everybody has abundance in Vedic culture, so there is no fear that, oh, I have to part away with 1/4 of it. Even 3/4 is too much to handle. That is remaining with me. So let it be, because the king is pious and I have trust that he will not misuse this wealth. Let it go, it will go to the good cause of the whole society. It will be very well distributed wealth for making facilities for the whole society. So that was the mood. In modern times, taxation laws are the most horrible forms of any lawmaking that you can come across. There are so many loopholes, and the language has to be redefined every now and then, because people always find some loopholes. And nowadays it has become interesting. CAs who are supposed to actually do the work of helping people, so to say, protect and multiply their wealth and yet pay their taxes properly, have become the very causes of hiding the wealth, manipulating the balance sheets. They spend hours doing that, and especially to not give taxes. Why this condition has come? Because the government officials themselves are corrupt, and their example is seen by others as, why should I give money to these people? Anyways, they are very selfish. They are not doing anything for the good of the society. So in our ISKCON, coming to our home ground, we have to make sure that in our temple, those who are in administrative positions, for whichever service that you do, the wealth that is allocated to you has to be properly utilized for that particular purpose, and tangible results be shown to people who gave you that wealth. Okay, this is how it has been done. In fact, not just results, but also accountability of that money, how that was spent. And if you maintain that type of transparency, whether people will pay taxes outside or not, they will surely give donations to ISKCON. That much we can assure. Why? Faith. There's so much trust that gets generated. So that is one part of the story. So if you are doing any service in ISKCON, money matters, be extremely transparent. Second, is transparent and accountable to those who give you the money. The second item is that there will be many projects in ISKCON which are not necessarily getting any funds from government, grants as they call them. But those projects will become successful if they become Samaj Manya, accepted in the society of the Vaishnavas. For example, you have to start a school, then the whole body of Vaishnavas feels that this is an important thing. Or we want to manifest a hospital for our own community nearby somewhere in our locality. All this can happen. And we don't need to wait for anything else from outside to support us. If we strongly feel that this is a good investment of my hard-earned wealth. Now the last part, there was no need of soaps and toilets and cinemas and bars. What does that mean? How is that related to taxation? These are all luxuries. They are not necessities. So people are trying to get luxuries, but they don't have the natural abundance of things that they need to have. So our civilization, we have made necessities into luxuries and luxuries into necessities. Any comments or questions?
What is the difference? There is no force as well as the right to take money.
Say again.
There is no force and right to take it on foot.
No force basically means that the citizens were voluntarily giving the taxes. They are happy giving their taxes to the king. And no encroachment, that we know. That government doesn't need to come and take away forcefully something from you. Further, Rajadharma continues. Prabhupada is quite elaborate, spending time on explaining this. The king had to see that the reserved energy of humanity was properly utilized. Ashu, can you operate? What was the king's duty? Reserved energy of humanity was properly utilized. Human energy is meant not exactly for fulfilling animal propensities, but for self-realization. The whole government was specifically designed to fulfill this particular purpose. Can you imagine a government designed for that purpose? As such, the king had to select properly the cabinet ministers, but not on the strength of voting background. The ministers, the military commanders, and even the ordinary soldiers were all selected by personal qualification, and the king had to supervise them properly before they were appointed to the respective posts. The king was especially vigilant to see that the tapasvis, or persons who sacrificed everything for disseminating spiritual knowledge, were never disregarded. The king knew well that the Supreme Personality of Godhead never tolerates any insult to his unalloyed devotees. Prabhupada puts that in italics. Such tapasvis were trusted leaders, even of the rogues and thieves, who would never disobey the order of the tapasvis. Any examples? Narad Muni was respected by Kamsa, Hiranyakashipu, Murugari. The 6 Goswamis, they were respected. Dhira Dhira Jana Priyo. Thieves and rogues we would also respect. The king would give special protection to illiterates, the helpless, the widows of the state. Defense measures were arranged previous to any attack by the enemies. I think India signed a treaty on 56,000 crore rupees of Rafale jet fighters with France. Dassault Aviation, the name of the company. Don't ask me this. I come from a background of Air Force in my NCC. So these things are natural to be known about defense measures. So just recently our PM signed. That's called defense measures were arranged previous to any attack by the enemies. The taxing process was easy, and it was not meant for squandering, but was for strengthening the reserve fund. Does our government have a reserve fund? Is there any such a thing that exists? A reserve fund? There is a Reserve Bank of India that I know, but I wonder whether there are any reserve funds. Reserve in the sense of we are aware that we have debt. So debt is not a sign of having you having reserve funds, right? We have like crores and crores, thousands of crores of debt. So that's why I'm asking that question. But kings in those days had reserve funds. Does ISKCON Pune have reserve fund? Yes, we have. The soldiers were recruited from all parts of the world, and they were trained for special duties. So anybody interested in becoming soldier? Yeah. Because there was Bharat Varsha, whole world was Bharat. So they had no problem with, recruiting an American, whatever, American land-born. I also feel there is an interesting twist here. Just like Brahmanas, if you need education, you can go to any country and get education. Similar, if you are a Kshatriya, in those days, the Kshatriya could choose under whose jurisdiction would he like to serve as a soldier. Makes sense? Means he is born in, say, in a particular province, but the soldier decides. Like in the beginning of Mahabharata war, they declare, whoever wants to go and whichever side, do it now only, you can't do it after the war begins. What does that mean? Means that every single soldier of any army had the choice that if they felt, no, this is adharmic, I want to go on that side, that is dharmic, then you could do that. Isn't that interesting? Just like if you want to gain knowledge, you are a Brahmana, you can go to any country and gain knowledge, right? There is no such a restriction on you. Even now, I hope. You can go to Australia, America, Harvard, Oxford, somewhere and get knowledge. And then you are called a scholar from the Oxford, not an Indian anymore. Is it not? Like that. That was for soldiers also. If he had chivalry and he wanted to serve as a Kshatriya, then he could choose. I guess that's where it comes from. That they were recruited from all over the world. Which meant that if the king is of a good caliber and he was really taking care of the engagement and the nourishment of the soldiers very properly, then soldiers could actually go and join that king rather than serving in the so-called province. And I was wondering about this word, they were trained for special duties. What does that mean? It's like commando training, or they could handle any situation in their life. And it seems that every soldier is a kind of a commando training fellow. That kind of tone there is. They were trained for special duties. You like war stories? How many of you like war stories? Okay, I'll tell one. An interesting one. What is the meaning of trained for war? You should know this. Sometimes we sit in our homes eating our paneer sabji, and we have no clue what goes on there on the so to say war fronts. So this is an American war story. American troop, 22 of them, were going through a valley in Afghanistan, and they were suddenly ambushed. So in the valley it is very difficult when you are ambushed, because from both the mountains there are super fire on them. Now there are a particular type of fighter planes that are heavy loaded with, so to say, artillery, missiles and everything else, but they don't fly very high. They just stay above the clouds, invisible in general to the masses below. So when they were ambushed, they sent the message. The message in the code language means the troops have met. That's the code language. Troops have met means what? There is a war. So that's a code. So the message came, and then there are two of them who are hovering up there in the clouds. So one fellow, he said to the other that you stay here, I will go and look at the situation and come back. So he went below the clouds with all the thudding thing that happens. And then he saw that the whole of their troop was being ambushed on both sides. So in those days, this was 2002, there were no great radar systems in the airplanes. So you have to count mentally. You have to watch on the dial your speed of dropping in the valley of the airplane, and you have to count for every second 1001, 2002, 2003, second wise. That means you have come 1000 feet low, 2000 feet low, like that. So that fellow was counting like this, and he was bombing. So he came into the valley, he bombed on both the sides, and he went back. Again he came back into the valley, counting mentally. It's all pitch dark. Both sides is mountain. If you misplace You hit your own plane and you are dead. And you don't know how much can you go down also. So he did that repeatedly, 3-4 times he did it. And then his ammunition got over. So then he went up. And he was the most experienced fighter pilot. So he went up and he told his friend, now you go. And he said, hey, wait a minute, but I have no clue of how to do this, such kind of bombing, where you have no clue of the territory in terms of contours of the mountains and how. So he said, I know how to do that. So then he brought him and they together came down and he would count on the, so the 1001, 2002, 3003, and then go and he would bomb. And then he would bring him back again. Distance between two planes, only 10 feet. They call wing to wing. They come down. Such discipline these people have. Come down, bomb, go up. Again come down, bomb, go up. They did that 6 times. Totally. Not even one of those 22 soldiers of America died in that ambush. And you may wonder कि अरे इसका भी जान जोखिम में है ना, उसको भी कोई उड़ा सकता है उसके एयरप्लेन को, ऐसे नहीं कि वो everything is plain and simple. Why am I telling this story? When we say soldiers are trained for special duties, what does that mean? It means that you feel so much for your people that you can lay down your life for them. That's the meaning of special training. And how many of us do we think that we have leaders like that, parents like that, or spiritual, persons like that in our life? Who would do that for us? Is what decides the quality of any organization. Interesting. So why Kshatriyas were so respected was this reason, that they were this type of people. And then the citizens have no issue, giving their whatever, taxation, this, that, because they know these people are this type in the background. So these are all modern war stories. We could go back into the Krishna-Arjuna time, and we know about Arjuna. He was very famous at taking vows. When Brahmana said that my sons of my wife are dying, what kind of king is this? बोले तुम्हारे पत्नी से जो बच्चे हो रहे हैं मर रहे, तो किंग ने क्या बुरा किया भाई तुम्हारा? But 1/6 of the karma of the king affects the citizens. So king must be doing something bad because I am pious. I have not done anything wrong. That's why he was blaming the king. And then Arjuna takes a vow, I will protect. So this is the kind of Kshatriyas. Can you imagine Arjuna with his Gandiva bow standing outside maternity home, going round and round, making sure that the child doesn't die? What kind of Kshatriya is this? This is for one Brahmana in his kingdom. This is the kind of responsibility they would take. So, anyways. Now comes Moksha Dharma. So till now was Raja Dharma. The paragraph changes. As far as salvation is concerned, one has to conquer the principles of lust, anger, unlawful desires, avarice and bewilderment. मुक्ति चाहिए तो क्या करना है? You have to conquer काम, क्रोध, लोभ, मोह, मद, मात्सर्य. To get freedom from anger, one should learn how to forgive. To be free from unlawful desires, one should not make plans. We'll come to explanation. No. I just want to read first. What is Moksha Dharma? How it is to be practiced. By spiritual culture, one is able to conquer sleep. By tolerance only can one conquer desires and avarice. Disturbances from various diseases can be avoided by regulated diets. By self-control, one can be free from false hopes. And money can be saved by avoiding undesirable association. Interesting clues. By practice of yoga, one can control hunger. And worldliness can be avoided by culturing the knowledge of impermanence. Anvikshikya shoka moho. Dizziness can be conquered by rising up. False arguments can be conquered by factual ascertainment. Talkativeness can be avoided by gravity and silence. And by prowess, one can avoid fearfulness. Perfect knowledge can be obtained by self-cultivation. One must be free from lust, avarice, anger, dreaming, etc. to actually attain the path of salvation.
So this comes from a series of verses in Bhagavatam.
Please repeat. Asankalpa jayet kamam, krodham kama vivarjanat, artha anartha ikshaya lobham, bhayam tattva avamarshanaat. So asankalpat jayet kamam. How do you conquer lust? Asankalpa. Asankalpa means I will never enjoy sex life. I will never get into this business. That is called sankalpa, means to make an oath that I will do this. Asankalpa means to take a determined oath. I will not do it. Asankalpa jayet kamam. Just like we all have experience on Ekadashi day, we know we are supposed to fast from grains. And what do? In the morning we tell our mind, today, no grains. And then what happens? Throughout the day you manage without eating grains. This is how asankalpat jayet kama. Then krodham kama vivarjanat. How do you conquer anger? You conquer kama because kamat krodho abhijayate. Frustration of expectation produces anger. So you are too angry. Krodham kama vivarjanat. Give up the expectation. Then अर्थ अनर्थ इक्षया लोभम. अर्थ जिस अनर्थ को खड़ा करता है उसको देखकर लोभ के ऊपर विजय पा सकते हैं. अर्थ अनर्थ इक्षया लोभम. एंड भयम तत्व अवमर्शनात्. One can conquer fear, worry by meditating on what is truth. Tattva. I told you that story, that lady who asked me on the New Jersey train station, are you a monk? Trying to be. Are you worried about something? I said, no. I'm just looking at the display because my train, there is no number, no name on the trains there. So I don't want to miss my train. Tell me how to not get worried about anything in life. She's asking. So then I told her to repeat this. We are not human beings having spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having human experience. So she liked that statement so much. So how do you know that you are a spiritual being? How can you become true to your real being? Sure. I said, for that you have to practice spiritual culture. So A, B, C, D, E. Association, Bhagavad Gita, chanting, diet and engagement in bhakti. Service. This is called following spiritual culture. It makes you delight in your spiritual status. And then I quoted this, Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati bhavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapo. I am fireproof, I am waterproof, I am water, nuclear bomb proof. She said, really? Then she was like, for first time in her life, she was hearing this kind of concepts. And then I said, if you follow these 5 things, you will become fearless, worry-free in your life. So, tattva, bhayam, tattva avamarshanaat. One can overcome fear by contemplating on truth. Purports are beautiful, but we don't have time. I would request you to do that at home. Anvikshikya shokamohau dambham mahad upasaya yogantarayan maunena himsam kamadi anihaya. By discussing spiritual knowledge, one can conquer lamentation and illusion. That's why Yudhishthir Maharaj came to Bhishma. By serving a great devotee, one can overcome hypocrisy. Dambham, mahad upasaya. By keeping silent, one can avoid obstacles on the path of mystic yoga. Interesting. Yogantaraya. Antaraya means obstacles on the path of your bhakti yoga. How can you avoid them? Maunam. Practice no chit chat. You understand the term? No chit chat. So Maunam. If you just follow this one principle, you will save truckloads of trouble and waste of time in your life. People are doing gossiping. Maunam. So Yogantarayan Maunena. And Himsam, Prabhupada translate Himsa as envy towards others. Kama Adi Anihaya. By simply stopping sense gratification, one can conquer envy towards. Why we become envious of others? Because we are envious of the way they are doing sense gratification. We are not able to do like them. So if you conquer sense gratification, you become free from envy. How many of you feel bad or envious if you see somebody is enjoying smoking? For us, that is, it doesn't register for us as an enjoyment in first place. So we are not envious of that. Is it not? We don't feel anything about it. But how many of you feel envious if a devotee gets some appreciation in the community of Vaishnavas, which you don't get? That means you want appreciation for sense gratification, personal enjoyment. So if you overcome this also, then the envy goes away. That's the connection. Actually, people can write books on one statement that are written here. Bhagavatam just gives in a nutshell, the principle. Like, atyahara, that one word. I saw that recent book called The Joy of Less by Miss Minimalist, one lady. She calls herself Miss Minimalist. Entire book on this one thing only. How to avoid atyahara in life and become happy. The Joy of Less. So any of you want to write books, I would encourage you very strongly to borrow principles from here in Bhagavatam and do some good work, for the society. Krupaya bhutajam dukkham. Dhruvaha, you'll have to sit down. You cannot walk around in the class. Krupaya bhutajam dukkham. Daivam jaihat samadhina. Atmajam yoga viryena. Nidram sattva nishevaya. By good behavior and freedom from envy, one should counteract sufferings due to other living entities. Adi bhautik dukh. How do you overcome? You have to follow these two things. Krupaya, be merciful, compassionate. Bhutajam dukkham. Then daivam jaihat samadhina. That is adhi daivik dukkha. How do you counteract? By meditation in trance, samadhi. One should counteract adhi daivik dukkha. Adi bhautik, by practicing good behavior and non-envy. People give you hard time. You show good behavior, non-envy. That's how you counteract adhibhautik misery. How do you counteract adhidaivik misery? Samadhi. When you sit down for chanting, get absorbed. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Don't disturb. I am in Samadhi. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Our Sachinandan Swami says, while you are chanting, you should keep smiling. It's a good practice, you know. So things are happening around and they are giving trouble, and we look at them and smile. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Daivam Jaihat Samadhina. Then by practicing Hatha Yoga, Pranayama, one should counteract Adhi-atmika misery. So if you are having some Adhi-atmik misery, body and mind, some disease, you know, some mental disturbance, yogasanas, pranayam on a daily basis, one should practice. Jaihat. Jaihat means to destroy. Similarly, by developing mode of goodness, especially in regard to eating, one should conquer sleep. Nidram sattva nishevaya. How many of you have problem of oversleeping? Yeah, even I have sometimes. So how do you overcome? Sattvic eating, moderate. Purports are really good, but we don't have time. Rajastamascha satvena Sattvam chopashamena cha Etat sarvam gurau bhaktya Purusho hyanjasa jayet. One must conquer the modes of passion and ignorance by developing goodness. Then one must conquer mode of goodness, sattva guna, by promoting oneself to the platform of Shuddha Sattva. Don't stay happily in goodness. And now it's an interesting line. Whatever we have said till now, all this can be done automatically if one engages in the service of the spiritual master with faith and devotion. Wow! So, Sudar ki, ek lohar ki, huh? One bang and everything accomplished. In this way, one can conquer the influence of the modes of nature. How many of you been to that temple in Vrindavan near Kusum Sarovar of Radha Vanvihari? There is that lady, I forget her name, Palindri Mataji something. She, and there is one another 50-year-old man. She is 70-year-old. There is another devotee from Scotland, I think, 50-year-old. And there is one Ma. Ma means 70, I don't know, 70 plus. So they three people maintain that temple. And morning to night they have engagement. So even if they are coughing, sneezing, having adhyatmic misery going on, they continue their service because there is nobody to serve. 4 hours max they sleep in the day. And whole day goes in cooking, cleaning, deity worship, meeting guests, preaching. Because so many people keep coming there all the time. And every time you meet them, they greet you as if you are their family member. Very cheerful and happy. But you don't know in the background how much suffering they are undergoing, through the ill health and everything else. Anyways, recently that temple approached ISKCON, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, and requested that we give some brahmacharis to go and stay there. And even couples who can go for some time and stay there to take care of that temple. In case you are interested, we would like to send you. This is an advertisement. But the point I was trying to make is, in their lifestyle, because they are so dedicated to the service of their spiritual master, you can clearly see all these things happening. They have conquered sleep, conquered kaba, lust, conquered krodha, conquered, why? Just for one item. So you want a graphic example of what we just now discussed in Bhagavatam in modern times. Go and see that temple and the devotees who run it. How many of us can say like that? That in our temple we have such a situation. Why we are sometimes in trouble is because we are not dedicated with faith and devotion to the service of our spiritual master. And then we have to adopt all kinds of tricks and techniques, just to set right some paltry problems, which are not even real problems. So, this is the power of serving the spiritual master with faith and devotion. So, this is called Moksha Dharma. How many of you are inspired to follow Moksha Dharma? Oh my God, if you are not yet inspired, then I don't know what to do. This is something we have come here for. Don't take moksha here in the long context of the merging and all that stuff. It is just a plain salvation to attain one's spiritual status. Swarupa Siddhi. That is the actual definition of mukti. Muktir hitva anyatha rupam swarupena vyavasthitihi. To be situated in one's swarupa in service of Krishna is called mukti. So that's moksha dharma for us. How many of you are feeling dizzy in the class? Dizziness can be conquered by rising up. Sorry. So, can you imagine one paragraph can change so much of our life? This is the power of these books. We should profusely distribute them to people. I have never heard or read such quality literature before coming to ISKCON. Honestly, I'm telling you. I have read I don't know what to call it, kachara. Not kachara. I have read really good stuff also. A lot of things. But it was only after coming in touch with Prabhupada books that I really felt, satisfied. This is something so wonderful. And one thing I wanted to mention, why I showed you these verses of Bhagavatam. Yes, true. So that I inspire you to please read those purports. No, there is one more reason. Yeah, how Prabhupada gives his purports. He never speaks anything outside Bhagavatam or scriptures. Even his purports are perfectly Bhagavatam or scriptures. It's not that अपना कुछ मसालेदार story चालू कर देते बीच में. Nothing like that. Just plain straight, This is how we should preach. And even if he tells a masaledar story, that has got to do with that line there in the purport that we are talking about. Making direct connection. No chit chat. No faltu jokes. Anywhere. So we should not develop that habit, nor should we cultivate that as a practice when we teach to others. Shuddha ghee ka laddu, no dalda. You give people, there are customers. They may not be many in number, but they will come for your classes. So anyways. Now, Stri Dharma. As far as women class are concerned, they are accepted as a power of inspiration for man. Hari bol. First introduction. As such, women are more powerful than men. Solid introduction. Mighty Julius Caesar was controlled by a Cleopatra. Such powerful women are controlled by shyness. So here is a world to be controlled, and that world has to be controlled through Raja Dharma by a big powerful leader like a Kshatriya, and that fellow has to have a woman who controls him. And that woman should be controlled by her power of shyness. Therefore, shyness is important for women. This is, these small ones are very nice. Prabhupada doesn't say much, but makes a very emphatic point. Shyness is important for women. Once this control valve is loosened, some fluid engineering, Women can create havoc in society by adultery. What was Arjuna's fear? Kulakshaya. If all these Kshatriyas die, then who will protect the women? They will lose their shyness. Or even if they don't lose their shyness, people will go and exploit them. And that's why I don't want to commit this activity of the war. Adultery means production of unwanted children known as Varna Sankar who disturb the world. How many of you think we are disturbing the world? We means I am asking. Individually I am asking. You feel I am a disturbance in this world? How many of you feel I am a very fruitful, contributive, very great, like not Messiah, but at least a great noble soul that has been sent to this world, who is doing really some benevolent work. So don't have to raise hands or anything. It's a personal question to be. Actually, sometimes we read purport and we say, yeah, people are creating disturbance. People, why are you are creating disturbance? As long as we are not aware of the codes of conduct and we are doing our own thing in spiritual life, we are a disturbance. So we are a disturbance to our own people, family, sometimes to other, spiritualists who practice spiritual culture, what to speak of other society around. So one has to be aware that I should cultivate the qualities mentioned here so that my disturbance to others can be minimized. So it's not just women I'm saying about, this is for men also, everybody, disturbance part. So shyness manifests in what? It's called modesty, Ri. Ri is a very important quality. Modesty means the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you even giggle, the way you eat your food, the way you talk to the members of opposite sex, or rather don't talk to them at all. The way you even walk, for that matter. I remember, I don't know whether to tell it or not, once my sister just ran from here to there and my mother gave her a tight slap because she had become 13 plus. And I was like, I felt as if I was slapped. I didn't get it, why it was being, in that mood. And later on I understood that when they attain puberty, they are not supposed to run like that in public. It's not good for them, it's not good for people who watch. So it will take some time for figuring it out. Another time, I got slapped. I came home, I was coming from my play, and I just, typical, and there is a button for switching on the lights, and then you go and you switch on all the 5 buttons in one go, like that. And you switch on everything, whether you need it or not, basically. And I turned around and there was my Dadaji, pat! He gave one full slap. I said, what happened? We should not expend more energy than needed for the task. Because that energy belongs to God. This guy, itna sara movement, and the energy wastage, that's a different topic, but I am wasting my energy also in doing that, right? So we should not expend more energy than needed for the task. That's why you have seen pure devotees are so calculated in their moves, in their volume, in everything that they do. And you wonder, thoda aur expend karne se kya ho jayega? But no, they're very calculated. Like His Holiness Radhan Swami Maharaj, when he's talking to the person in front of him, 10 people standing around that person can't hear what he's talking to this person. And everybody is putting their ear into the conversation. Still they can't hear. So it's called calculated. That much energy is needed, you expend that much only. So, good to get slapped sometimes in life. How many of you got slapped? For good reasons, huh? Not like... Very nice. Fortunate you are. So go and thank those people who gave you slaps. When you go now and meet them around somewhere, say thank you. 20 years back you slapped me. It really helped me a lot in life. Actually, one of the greatest learning that happens in life is when abrupt change is brought in your consciousness. Abrupt in the sense that samskara becomes very deep. So I think if I would have just made a sweet request, itni energy, shakti vay karne ki zarurat kya hai, I would have laughed at him and gone like that. There is no samskara there. But then you get a part. Everything changes after that. It's a serious matter. You know what it is. Now, of course, in modern times, this will be called child abuse. And then, but if the child 20 years down the line is happy about it, I think that is not child abuse. It should be considered as benediction. Okay. Stri Dharma is all about shyness. That's all. That's one point that Prabhupada is making. All that the Stri is supposed to do, in the whole world is so be shy. Very important quality. Now the last item is Bhagavad Dharma. The last item taught by Bhishma Dev was the process of pleasing the Lord. We are all eternal servants of the Lord. And when we forget this essential part of our nature, we are put into material conditions of life. One line. When are we put into material conditions of life? Whenever we forget the essential part of our spiritual nature. And material conditions of life we know. Adhyatmik, adibhautik, adidaivik. Headache. Nothing else you get. The simple process of pleasing the Lord, for the householders especially, is to install the deity at home. By concentrating on the deity, one may progressively go on with the daily routine work. Wow! Worshipping the deity at home, serving the devotee, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, residing in the holy place, chanting the holy name of the Lord, are all inexpensive items. Prabhupada knows Kali Yuga jivas are too calculative, by which one can please the Lord. Thus the subject matter was explained by the grandfather to his grandchildren. Prabhupada makes it so personal. So there is a Dadaji who is sitting, so not sitting, lying on a deathbed, and is talking to his grandson. This is called Vedic culture. Any comments or questions?
Is the explanation of Bhagavad Dharma in the Bhagavad also? Because what this is one paragraph of this.
Actually, this whole Srimad Bhagavatam is Bhagavad Dharma. So anyone who is studying Srimad Bhagavatam obviously gets to know a lot of facets of it. But still, Prabhupada is a genius. You can see Prabhupada didn't fail to mention the 5 most potent items of Bhakti Yoga. There are 64 items, of which 5 are most important. A, B, C, D, D. Association of devotees, studying Bhagavatam, chanting the holy name, deity worship, dhamavas. So he gave it. Of course, I was not planning to make that point explicitly because I thought you understood. So this is how Prabhupada actually gave, in a nutshell, the whole Bhagavad Dharma. And he qualifies it for householders especially. So we should take that as instruction. We should not think this is some optional subject in our life.
Stating that to be free from unlawful desires, one should not make plans.
Asankalpat jayet kamam. Kamam is unlawful desires. Sankalpa means making plans for sense gratification. Asankalpa means don't make plans for sense gratification. That clause is not added, so it makes something confusing. But asankalpa means making no plans. So if you are feeling sleepy in the chair that you sit, you stand up. Then if you are sitting and chanting your japa, I'm not saying you means you, I'm just, we are sitting and chanting your japa, class is there. If you are sitting and chanting your japa in the temple and you are feeling dozing, so stand up. Yes. I don't know whether when you get chakkar you should stand up or not. Yeah. Now dizziness here Prabhupada uses in the terms of not giddiness. You feel dizzy means they call chanting, chanting and dozing together. So that is called dizziness. You are unsure of what is happening around you because your consciousness has become dulled due to ignorance.
Like all this and afterwards we saying that one sentence, forget all this. It is similar to that, no? Sarva Dharma Parijatya.
Kamamekam Sharanam Vraja. Something similar. Very nice comment. So thank you all very much. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.